There are approximately 17,423 rules in the Galactic Survival Manual, 3rd edition. Rule number 1 is never argue with Evgelion about tentacle hygiene. Rule number 2 is always carry a translator that understands sarcasm. Rule number 3, printed in letters so large they take up an entire page, is this: if a human smiles, run. Thimblek Corvo had read exactly none of them. Not because he was stupid. Stupidity would have made the disaster easier to explain later. Thimblek had graduated near the top of his class at the Intergalactic Diplomatic Academy, passed xenocultural sensitivity with almost perfect marks, and could recite the Treaty of Nebulous Intentions backward while solving a 7-sided logic cube. His problem was worse. He was confident. Confidence in most species was useful. In young bureaucrats assigned to human relations, it was a medical condition. That morning, on Station Gamma 7, Thimblek stood before the mirror and adjusted his ceremonial sash for the 14th time. His gray-blue scales shimmered with respectable authority. All 4 eyes blinked in the sequence his mentor called trustworthy competence. His dorsal fin remained polished, upright, and ready for history. Today, he told his reflection, I make my career. His communication device chirped. The holographic face of Coordinator Neris appeared above his desk. She looked as if she had aged 40 years overnight, alarming because Methusians aged backward. Thimblek, she said, thank the eternal void. We have a situation. A wiser being would have heard situation and hidden under the furniture. Thimblek heard opportunity. What kind of situation, Coordinator? The human delegation arrives in 4 hours. His dorsal fin rose. Excellent. I have been preparing for a senior assignment. You are not listening. Ambassador Kelridge was supposed to receive them, but he has locked himself in his quarters and will not stop screaming. Thimblek's smile faltered. Screaming? Mostly about smiles. Also paperwork. Also something about never trusting a human who says, I have an idea. That seems dramatic. It is Kelridge, so yes. But he has experience, which makes the screaming inconveniently credible. Neris leaned closer. You will handle the humans. For one bright, stupid moment, Thimblek felt pride flood through him. I will not let you down. Read the briefing documents first. Of course. Actually read them. Especially the red sections. And the yellow sections. And the purple section that appears to be vibrating. Before Thimblek could ask why a document would vibrate, the hologram vanished. He opened the briefing file. 643 pages loaded onto his data pad. The first page contained one sentence, repeated in larger and larger fonts until the final version nearly broke the screen. Humans are not like other species. Thimblek scrolled past it. Of course humans were not like other species. No species was like other species. That was why diplomacy existed. That was why professionals such as himself wore ceremonial sashes and endured academy seminars on nonverbal mucus expression. Page 2 showed a comparative threat chart. Humans ranked first. Above the Kazathian hive, which had once consumed a moon during a religious argument. Above the dreadlords of Omega Centauri, who were composed primarily of hatred and administrative errors. Thimblek narrowed all 4 eyes. Ridiculous. He had seen humans on news feeds. They were small, soft-skinned, structurally underarmored. Most lacked claws, venom, spines, defensive gas sacs, or proper scale coverage. He skipped ahead to human diplomatic protocols. The first line read, there are no protocols. They make them up as they go along. May the eternal void have mercy on your soul. Thimblek sighed. Whoever wrote this file clearly had unresolved trauma. For the next 3 hours he prepared the sensible way. He memorized greeting customs. He practiced the human handshake until his primary hand ached. He reviewed safe conversation topics and marked several unsafe ones, including religion, territorial wars, cuisine, and whether pineapple belonged on something called pizza. By the time he reached docking bay 12 he felt ready. Then he noticed every other species leaving. A Telvian cargo handler saw Thimblek's liaison badge, read the word human, and crossed the bay without blinking. 3 Kreblian engineers suddenly remembered urgent duties elsewhere. Even the maintenance drones accelerated toward the exits. Thimblek stood alone beneath the docking lights. The human ship arrived with a soft metallic clunk. Its name appeared across the hull in cheerful block letters. Tenacious optimism. The airlock hissed open. A human woman stepped through. Medium height. Medium build. Brown hair tied back in a style his database called a ponytail, despite containing no pony. Gray jumpsuit. Calm posture. Clear eyes. Her name tag read, Cassidy Marlowe, Human Liaison Officer. She looked directly at Thimblek. Then she smiled. It was small. Polite. almost gentle. His briefing file, somewhere in the back of his mind, began screaming. Thimblek ignored it and extended his hand. "Welcome to Station Gamma 7, Thimblek said, extending his primary hand with the careful confidence of a diplomat who had practiced in front of a mirror. Cassidy Marlowe took it. The pressure was friendly. It was also, according to several of Thimblek's pain receptors, excessive. "Great to meet you, Thimblek," she said. "Love the scales. Very professional." His scales warmed. Perhaps the manual had exaggerated. Then two more humans emerged from the airlock. The first was tall, thin, and built like spare parts held together by enthusiasm. His hair stood in several impossible directions, as if gravity had personally offended it. His coveralls had been clean at some point in history, though not recently. A toolbox hung from one shoulder and hummed softly. "This is Dexter Finch," Cassidy said. "Engineer." Dexter waved. "Hi. Your docking clamps are misaligned by 3 millimeters. Thimblek blinked. "You have been aboard the station for 9 seconds. "Yeah. It's pretty obvious." The second human was shorter, rounder, and carried a data pad covered in stickers from stations, ports, and establishments that looked legally questionable. Her eyes moved over the bay once, and Thimblek had the uncomfortable feeling she had already memorized it. "Yuki Tanaka," Cassidy said. "Cultural specialist." Yuki smiled. "Nice station. Bad traffic flow." Thimblek checked his itinerary before the conversation could become more unstable. "I have arranged a comprehensive 17-day cultural exchange program, including botanical gardens, council observation, diplomatic briefings, and a formal dinner with representatives from 14 species." Cassidy's smile widened. Not threatening exactly, but wider. 17 days, she said. "That's adorable." Thimblek's dorsal fin lowered. "Adorable? We'll need 3 days tops. We have a ship retrofit, a cargo run, and Dex promised his kid he'd be back for a birthday." Dexter pulled out a small hologram of a human child with the same rebellious hair. "Turning 8. Huge deal. Cake shaped like a spaceship. I cannot miss that." Thimblek looked at his 17-day schedule. Each block had been color-coded, cross-referenced, and approved by 3 departments that rarely agreed on the direction of gravity. But the protocols? Yuki laughed. It was not hostile. It was worse. It was affectionate, as if protocols were a cute local superstition. "Thimblek, honey," she said, "we're humans. We don't do protocols. We do functional." Cassidy lifted both hands. "Show us what needs doing and we'll make it work in 3 days." That sounded impossible. Thimblek had been trained never to call a guest impossible to their face. "I suppose," he said, "we could adjust." "Excellent." Cassidy clapped once. "First question. Where's the nearest coffee?" Thimblek checked his data pad. "There is a refreshment facility on level 4. "Good. Dex gets cranky without caffeine." "I do not get cranky," Dexter said. "I get focused. You rewired our ship's coffee maker because it brewed too slowly. It took 30 seconds. That is unacceptable. How fast does it brew now?" 3 seconds. "And?" Dexter hesitated. "It occasionally achieves sentience." Thimblek stopped walking. Cassidy did not. "Only on Thursdays," Dexter added. "Usually it just makes coffee." "Your beverage machine becomes intelligent?" "A little bit." Thimblek waited for a laugh. No laugh came. At the Cosmic Bean, the Grebin barista watched Cassidy order the strongest drink available with extra espresso and visibly reconsidered its career. "That is toxic to 17 biochemistries," the barista warned. "Good thing I'm not 17 biochemistries." The cup that emerged steamed in colors Thimblek's optical software refused to classify. Cassidy drank it, smiled, and said, "Could use more kick." The barista whispered something that sounded like a prayer. For the next 6 hours, Thimblek learned that humans did not walk. They advanced. Cassidy moved through corridors as if late to save something. Dexter inspected every panel and emergency hatch without slowing down. Yuki asked 3 security officers why checkpoint placement was so inefficient, then convinced 2 of them to help redraw the layout. Thimblek's itinerary collapsed in stages. By evening, he led them toward the Crystalline Nebula, the finest diplomatic restaurant on the station. The humans looked at the prices and chose the food court. "That place charges for atmosphere," Yuki said. "It does not." "It absolutely does. I can smell financial violence." So they ate at Gorblax's Grill, a sticky 4-table establishment whose main dish was called meat on sticks and whose health rating appeared to be a negotiation. Gorblax, a scarred 6-armed Telvuran, stared at the humans. "You people eat everything." "Guilty," Cassidy said. He served her something smoking. She took one bite, eyes watering, and smiled. Not bad. Needs more heat. At the next table, Dexter began arguing with a Krebelian engineer about thermodynamics. You cannot ignore physical law, the Krebelian snapped. Dexter drew a diagram on a napkin. But what if we improved its attitude? Yuki meanwhile taught 3 species poker and removed their money with surgical politeness. By the end of dinner, Cassidy had negotiated better docking rates, Dexter had gained access to engineering, and Yuki had made 17 friends who looked poorer but delighted. Thimblek watched the crowd part around them. The manual had been wrong. They were not invading the station. They were absorbing it. That night, Thimblek did not sleep. He sat in his quarters with the lights dimmed, his ceremonial sash folded on the chair like evidence from a crime scene, and opened the Galactic Survival Manual for the first time in his career. He went directly to Rule 3. If a human smiles, run. The chapter was 68 pages long. It had footnotes. The footnotes had sub-footnotes. One diagram required clearance he did not possess and still somehow displayed itself with the warning, "You are already involved." Thimblek read with growing horror as the manual classified human smiles into 47 known categories. The polite greeting smile was level 2, usually harmless unless paired with curiosity. The competitive smile was level 7, meaning the human had identified a challenge and would not rest until reality apologized. Level 9 was active problem-solving mode with high collateral risk. The recommended response to level 9 was, evacuate or assist. There is no middle ground. Thimblek kept reading. The case studies were worse. A human engineer had once repaired a failing orbital farm with kitchen wiring, a pressure valve, and something called stubborn optimism. The farm did not merely survive. It began producing crops at 137% of projected capacity, which several agricultural species called impossible and one human called pretty decent. Another report described a human negotiator who ended a 3-century trade war by locking both sides in a room with snacks and refusing to let them leave until they admitted they were being ridiculous. The final note read, humans are not unpredictable because they lack patterns. They are unpredictable because their patterns are insane. By artificial dawn, Thimblek understood Ambassador Calrich. Screaming now seemed like an underreaction. He met the humans at the cosmic beam. Cassidy took one look at his face and nodded. You read the manual. How did you know? You've got the look. What look? The look every species gets after realizing the warning labels were not jokes. Dexter arrived carrying the humming toolbox. It seemed louder today. Thimblek wondered if it had opinions. Ready to make your power core sing? Dexter said. Thimblek's throat tightened. Metaphorically? Dexter considered that for too long. Probably. Yuki appeared beside them with a drink labeled probably not lethal. We have to call today cultural exchange, she said, because controlled chaos looks bad in official reports. The engineering section sat deep inside Station Gamma 7, behind sealed doors, safety fields, and enough warning labels to make any sensible being feel respected by danger. The main power chamber opened like the inside of a metallic cathedral. Massive conduits climbed the walls. Blue-white energy pulsed through transparent containment vanes. The air smelled of charged metal and institutional anxiety. Chief Engineer Vix stood beside the central control platform. He was Krebelian, narrow-bodied, three-eyed, and already turning the color of panic. You brought the human, Vix said. Thimblek attempted dignity. Engineer Finch will merely inspect the system. Humans do not inspect. They notice. Then they ask questions. Then something that has worked perfectly for 400 years is suddenly considered embarrassing. Dexter was already circling the power core. He tapped one conduit with a small hammer. Vix made a strangled sound. Dexter crouched, opened a service panel, stared inside and went very still. Thimblek felt the room change. Cassidy leaned against the wall. Yuki took 2 careful steps backward. Dexter smiled. Not Cassidy's polite smile. Not Yuki's amused smile. This one was quiet. Focused. Level 7. Question, Dexter said. Why is this wired like someone lost a fight with spaghetti? Vix's scales flashed purple. That is the standard Krebelian configuration. It's terrible. The chamber went silent. Even the power core seemed to hum more cautiously. Vix turned slowly. That configuration was designed by the foremost engineering minds of the Krebelian collective. It was tested for 63 years. Reviewed by 17 committees. Certified by the Concordance. Dexter nodded. And still terrible. Thimblek felt his soul leave his body, inspect the exit routes and return disappointed. You cannot say that, Vix whispered. I just did. Look, you're routing power through 17 unnecessary junctions. This is like sending a message across the room by mailing it through 3 planets first. That is how it is done. But why? Because the manual says so. Dexter's smile changed. The teeth did not move much. The corners of his mouth barely shifted. But something entered the room with them. Thimblek knew it before he checked the manual in his memory. Level 9. Active problem-solving mode. Significant collateral risk. Evacuate or assist. Dexter held out his hand. Pass me the spinny thing with the lights. Thimblek squeaked. The what? The quantum spanner. Yuki touched Thimblek's elbow. You should stand back. What is about to happen? Progress, she said. That is not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Dexter looked at the ancient power core like it had personally insulted his child's birthday cake. Then he opened the first panel. What happened over the next 4 hours would later appear in Station Gamma 7's official archive under 3 different titles. The first title was Unapproved Power Core Adjustment. The second was Major Engineering Incident. The third, added by an exhausted clerk 3 days later, was That Time We Let the Human Touch Things and Somehow It Worked. Thimblek preferred the third. It was the only honest one. Dexter did not begin by asking permission. That, Thimblek noticed, seemed to be a fundamental human flaw. He began by pulling out 3 tools, removing a panel older than several minor governments, and making a satisfied noise that chilled every non-human in the chamber. Oh yeah, Dexter said. This is worse than I thought. Vix made a sound like a kettle realizing it had chosen the wrong profession. Put that panel back. Can't. You absolutely can. No, I mean I physically can, but morally I can't. I've seen what's behind it now. I'm responsible. That is not how responsibility works. It is for humans. Dexter reached deeper into the core housing. Every warning light on Vix's console blinked at once. Thimblek stepped back. Cassidy offered him popcorn. Where did you get that? He whispered. Pocket. Why do you have popcorn in engineering? Because Dex is in engineering. That answer explained nothing and somehow everything. At first, Vix only shouted. He shouted about protocols, warranty violations, thermal tolerances, committee approval, and the sacred dignity of 4-century-old engineering doctrine. Dexter listened while cutting through a bundle of obsolete control lines with a tool that sparked blue and smelled faintly of cinnamon. Then Vix stopped shouting and started correcting him. No, not that junction, he snapped. If you remove that one, you overload the secondary induction loop. Dexter paused. Unless we reroute through this bypass. There is no bypass. There is now. That would require a regulator. Dexter pulled one from his toolbox. Vix stared. Why do you have a Krebelian phase regulator? Dexter shrugged. Looked useful. You stole that from our storage bay. Borrowed. The station was using it badly. Thimblek opened his mouth to object, then closed it because the power curve on the display had just improved. That was the truly horrible part. It was working. The ancient system came apart in pieces. Cables that had done nothing for decades were removed. Redundant loops were fused into elegant new pathways. Power that had once crawled through 17 junctions now moved in clean, direct pulses. The core's rough industrial hums softened into something almost musical. This should be impossible, Vix muttered. Dexter's arm was buried elbow-deep in the machinery. You keep using that word like it means stop. It does mean stop. To you. The lights flickered. Every being froze. For one long breath, Station Gamma 7 went dim. Thimblek imagined 40,000 beings drifting in darkness because he had allowed one smiling human near a power core. Then the lights returned brighter than before. Dead panels across the chamber came alive. A row of forgotten diagnostic screens lit up for the first time in years. Numbers streamed across them. Old systems woke, checked themselves, and reported improved function as if they had merely been waiting for someone reckless enough to ask. Vix lowered himself into a chair. No, he whispered. Dexter emerged from behind the core, grease on his face, hair standing higher than physics should allow. There. 43% efficiency increase. Power drawdown 18%. Backup redundancy installed. Self-diagnostics upgraded. Also, I fixed the humming noise. Vix stared at the readings. This is above theoretical maximum. Your theory was pessimistic. That is not a technical explanation. It can be if you write it confidently. Thimblek checked his datapad with shaking hands. There is still the issue of authorization. Cassidy leaned over. Could this count as cultural exchange? No. Yuki glanced at the regulation file. Actually, visiting diplomatic personnel may make minor station adjustments in the interest of interspecies collaboration. Vix looked up slowly. This is not minor. Dexter wiped his hands on a rag that had already surrendered. Same parts. Mostly. New layout. Better attitude. In the corner, 3 small devices hummed softly. Thimblek pointed at them. What are those? Emergency backup power nodes. They are making my scales tingle. That means they're working. What else do they do? Dexter hesitated. Vic shut all 3 eyes. Why did he hesitate? Dexter brightened. They make excellent toast. Silence took the room. Then Vic stood, walked to the nearest wall, and rested his forehead against it. I need to file reports, he said. Reports about reports. Reports explaining why the reports sound insane. Cassidy patted his shoulder. Write that the humans strongly suggested improvements with such enthusiasm that resistance seemed futile. Vix considered it. That will help. As they left engineering, Thimblek looked back at the power core. It glowed cleaner now. Stronger. Like something ancient had been insulted into becoming young again. For the first time, Thimblek understood the real danger. Humans did not break rules because they hated order. They broke rules because sometimes the rules were the only thing keeping a broken system alive. By the time Thimblek filed his report, his hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly. Fear had become too simple a word. This was something more bureaucratic, more spiritual, and far more expensive. It was the sensation of watching reality commit paperwork fraud in front of witnesses. He sat in his quarters for 3 hours, trying to describe the power core incident in language that would not get him reassigned to asteroid sanitation. Power core efficiency increased by 43% sounded impossible. Human engineer modified core through unauthorized but successful improvisation sounded illegal. Backup power nodes also produced toast sounded like a cry for help. In the end, Thimblek submitted all 3. Coordinator Neris called within 12 seconds. Her holographic face appeared above his desk, and somehow she looked even younger than yesterday, which meant stress was aging her backward at alarming speed. They did what to the power core? Improved it, Thimblek said weakly. With authorization? Technically, it may qualify as cultural exchange. Neris closed her eyes. Behind her, Thimblek heard screaming. It was distant, muffled, and familiar. Is that Ambassador Kelridge? He heard the word human and began again. I understand him now. Good. That means you are learning. Neris leaned closer. Listen carefully. Your job is not to control humans. Thimblek stared at her. But I am their liaison. Yes. That means you stand close enough to redirect the blast. There is a blast? Usually metaphorical. Not always. She exhaled. Humans get results. They ignore regulations, insult physics, offend committees, and somehow leave systems stronger than they found them. Nobody controls that. Your duty is to make sure their chaos points in a useful direction. That is not very specific. Welcome to human relations. The call ended. Thimblek sat in silence. The humans had one more day on Station Gamma 7. One day. He could survive one day. Probably. Then someone knocked. It was not an ordinary knock. Ordinary knocks asked permission. This knock carried the energy of a sealed emergency report sliding under a door. Cassidy stood outside, smiling apologetically. Thimblek's spine went cold. What happened? Small situation. Every survival instinct in his body began packing luggage. Define small. Dex was helping engineering with routine maintenance. No. And he discovered that the waste recycling system has been leaking exotic particles into the lower decks for 6 months. Thimblek's scales lost color. That is impossible. We have 17 monitoring systems. Set to the wrong frequency. That is also impossible. Dex fixed them. That is how we noticed. Thimblek gripped the doorframe. What is the damage? Cassidy made a face. It was not a good face. The particles mutated some local microorganisms. His 4 eyes blinked out of sequence. Mutated how? They are growing very fast. How fast? 40 times normal. The corridor seemed to tilt. Cassidy continued, because humans apparently believed horror should be delivered efficiently. If we do nothing, they fill the lower deck in about 3 hours. After that, probably mid-decks. Eventually the station becomes a terrarium. Thimblek heard his own voice from very far away. A terrarium. Big one. Is it intelligent? Not yet. Not yet. I mean, probably not. Dex is checking. Thimblek stepped back into his quarters and considered closing the door forever. Cassidy caught it with one hand. Good news? Dex has a plan. That is not good news anymore. You are adapting beautifully. The lower decks of Station Gamma 7 were not built to impress visitors. They contained waste processing, atmospheric scrubbing, water recycling, and all the system's diplomats preferred to pretend did not exist. The walls were older there. The lights flickered with less confidence. The air smelled like machinery, damp metal, and something biological making ambitious decisions. Dexter stood in the main recycling chamber surrounded by scanners, cables, and equipment that looked assembled from spare parts and bad judgment. He turned when they entered. Then he smiled. Thimblek stopped walking. This was not level 7. Not level 9. This smile had too much hope in it. That made it worse. "Great, you're here," Dexter said. "Good news. The biomass is not malicious." Why would malicious be an option? Because sometimes life gets creative. Yuki appeared from behind a filtration column carrying snacks. "Bad news. It is extremely enthusiastic." Thimblek looked past them. The far wall pulsed. A greenish-gray layer of living matter crept across the pipes, spreading in slow, wet ripples. It made soft popping sounds as it divided. Every few seconds, another patch flowered open like a disgusting thought. Thimblek's stomach turned. What is the solution? Dexter lifted a sealed container. Inside, under magnification, tiny 8-legged creatures drifted like sleeping dust. "Earth organism," he said. "Tardigrades. Toughest little things in known biology. Radiation, vacuum, boiling, freezing, existential dread. They survive everything. You want to release Earth organisms into our station infrastructure. Helpful Earth organisms. That distinction is doing a lot of work. They eat the mutated microorganisms, stabilize the system, then hibernate when the food source runs out. What are the odds?" Dexter thought about it. 80-20. Thimblek closed all 4 eyes. Why do humans always give odds? Yuki opened a snack bag. Because certainty is how the universe lures you into looking stupid. Dexter connected the container to the recycler intake. The biomass pulsed again. A pipe groaned overhead. For the first time since the humans arrived, Thimblek did not reach for the manual. He stepped closer. "If this goes wrong," he said, "what do we do?" Dexter's smile sharpened. "Then we improvise." The first tardigrades entered the recycling system in a silver thread of fluid so thin it looked harmless. Thimblek knew by now that harmless-looking human solutions were among the most dangerous objects in the galaxy. Dexter watched the scanner like a surgeon watching a heartbeat. Yuki crouched beside a cracked pipe with a snack bag in one hand and a portable sensor in the other. Cassidy stood near the emergency cutoff, calm enough to make everyone else more nervous. The biomass reacted immediately. It recoiled from the intake valve, then surged forward as if offended by competition. Green-gray tissue climbed the inner walls of the recycling conduit. The chamber filled with wet clicking sounds. Thimblek's translator tried to classify them as communication, failed and displayed one word. "Unpleasant." "Status?" Cassidy asked. Dexter did not look away from the scanner. "Tardigrades are active." "Active good or active bad?" "Active hungry." On the display the tiny earth creatures woke. Under magnification they looked absurd. Soft bodies. Tiny legs. Slow, stubborn movement. No claws worth fearing. No eyes. No visible strategy. Then they reached the mutated colony. And began eating. Not cautiously. Not experimentally. They consumed. The biomass folded inward wherever they touched it. The green-gray film thinned, broke, and vanished in widening circles. The mutated organisms tried to divide faster. The tardigrades simply kept going, patient and relentless, as if the entire crisis was just a difficult breakfast. Vix's voice crackled through the engineering channel. "What am I looking at?" "Earth biology," Dexter said. "That is not an explanation." "It kind of is. The contamination levels are dropping." "Yep. They are dropping too fast." "Also yep." Vix went silent for 3 seconds. "I hate that your madness has measurable benefits. Most people do at first." For the first hour, it worked so well that Thimblek became suspicious. He had learned something important about humans. Their plans did not fail in ordinary ways. They failed theatrically, usually after a brief period of unreasonable success. Then the biomass changed color. A dark blue ripple moved across the far wall. The pulsing slowed. The clicking stopped. Every scanner screamed at once. Thimblek's blood went cold. "What does that mean?" Dexter leaned closer. "It's adapting." "To being eaten?" "Apparently. That seems bad." "That is definitely not ideal." The blue biomass withdrew from the open conduits and sealed itself into dense knots around the filtration spines. The tardigrades kept eating but slower now. The colony had discovered defense. For one terrible moment no one spoke. Then Dexter smiled. "Level 9 again." "Okay," he said. "New plan." Thimblek almost laughed, and that frightened him more than the biomass. Dexter began issuing instructions. Not requests. Instructions. Cassidy moved before he finished speaking. Yuki pulled up station schematics and began marking pressure routes. Thimblek found himself running to the manual override panel and entering access codes he was not technically authorized to use during a biological incident. He knew the regulation number. He ignored it. Open scrubber channel 6, Dexter said. That will vent recycled vapor through the thermal exchange line, Thimblek replied. Dexter looked up. Thimblek froze. He had understood the plan before it was explained. Yuki grinned. Look at you. Growing up. Do not make this emotional. He opened the channel. Hot vapor blasted through the lower pipes. The blue biomass loosened. The tardigrades surged again, drifting through the system like tiny, patient executioners. Cassidy adjusted pressure by hand when the automatic system lagged. Yuki redirected flow through a maintenance route that had been sealed since a plumbing disaster 12 years earlier. Dexter crawled beneath the recycler core and struck something with a wrench. The chamber boomed. The biomass tore free in sheets. For 12 seconds the entire lower deck looked alive. Then the scanner cleared. Growth rate fell to 0. Contamination dropped below detectable levels. The pulsing wall went still. Nobody moved. Nobody trusted victory yet. Dexter checked the numbers twice. Then a third time. Then he sat back on the floor, grease on his cheek, and gave a tired thumbs up. We're good. Thimblek stared at the clean pipes. Define good. Station not becoming a terrarium. Tardigrades entering hibernation. Waste system cleaner than it's been in 10 years. Also, the smell is better. Cassidy inhaled cautiously. He's right. Vic sent a message from engineering. It contained only 3 words. Oh, what? Dexter typed back, science. Mostly spite. Thimblek lowered himself onto the floor because his legs had filed a resignation. Around him, the lower deck hummed with a new steadiness. The immortal Earth creatures slept inside the system, waiting without hunger, without fear, without concern for time. Cassidy sat beside him and offered popcorn. He took some. It was salty. It was good. He hated that, after everything, it helped. This is what humans do? He asked. Cassidy looked at the quiet machinery. Mostly. You create problems. We find problems. You create new problems to defeat the old problems. Better problems, she corrected. Thimblek watched a final tardigrade icon blink into hibernation on the scanner. Tiny. Impossible. Patient. Like humanity reduced to a symbol. For the first time he understood the smile. It was not confidence. It was defiance wearing a friendly face. The celebration happened at Gorblax's grill because, according to Cassidy, any place that had survived human customers twice deserved loyalty. By then, half the station knew something had happened in the lower decks. Nobody knew exactly what. This did not stop rumors. One Telvian claimed the humans had fought a living sewer and won. A Kreblian insisted Dexter had taught Earth microbes military doctrine. A Vgelian merchant whispered that Thimblek had personally authorized the release of immortal predators into the plumbing. Thimblek wanted to correct them. Then he realized every version sounded less ridiculous than the truth. Gorblax had prepared a special dish for the humans. It arrived smoking heavily enough to trigger the fire suppression system. The sealing nozzles hissed once, detected what was on the plate, and appeared to give up. Cassidy took a bite. Tears filled her eyes. Fantastic, she said, voice strained. Can't feel my tongue. That is not a compliment, Thimblek said. For humans it can be. Dexter sat across from Vix, drawing more diagrams on napkins. Vix looked exhausted, offended, and alive in a way Thimblek had not seen before. Every few seconds he said, that violates procedure, then wrote it down anyway. You are actually considering his suggestions? Thimblek said. Vix did not look up. He improved my power core in 4 hours. He nearly gave you a breakdown. Yes, but an efficient breakdown. That is not a recognized engineering category. It will be after I submit the report. Across the room, Yuki had gathered a crowd and was telling stories about Earth history. Her audience included engineers, traders, cargo handlers, 2 off-duty security officers, and 1 Grebin barista who had begun serving Cassidy's coffee in reinforced cups. So let me understand, a Telvian said, 6 arms raised in disbelief. Humans went to war against birds? Large birds, Yuki said. And lost. We strategically reconsidered. You lost. They were fast, organized, and very rude. The crowd erupted in laughter. Thimblek heard himself laugh with them. The sound startled him. It was not a diplomatic laugh. Not polite. Not controlled. Not rehearsed at the academy. It was real. Cassidy noticed immediately. There it is. There what is? You stopped resisting. I have not stopped resisting. You ate popcorn during a biological containment crisis and laughed at a military defeat involving birds. You're one bad decision away from honorary human. Thimblek straightened. I am a professional officer of the Galactic Concordance. Cassidy nodded solemnly. That's what they all say before the caffeine. The words should have annoyed him. Instead he looked around. Gorblax's grill, once half empty and legally questionable, was packed. Species that normally avoided each other were sitting shoulder to shoulder. Engineers argued with traders. Security officers played cards with merchants. Vix, the strictest engineer on the station, was discussing unauthorized system redesign over meat on sticks. The humans had not just repaired systems. They had loosened the station. Something rigid had cracked, and through the crack, life had entered. Thimblek's data pad chirped. A message from Coordinator Neris appeared. Preliminary reports received. Commerce revenue up. Power stability up. Lower deck contamination eliminated. Morale indicators unexpectedly improved. Continue liaison duties until human departure. Do not let them redesign government. Thimblek reread the final sentence. Then he looked at Dexter, who was currently saying, "What if approval forms approve themselves?" Thimblek stood so fast his chair scraped backward. No. Dexter blinked. What? No self-approving forms. Vix paused, stylus hovering. Actually, that could reduce administrative delay by. No. Cassidy grinned into her dangerous food. Yuki leaned toward the crowd. See? He's learning the most important human skill. Thimblek narrowed his eyes. Which is? Knowing which impossible idea to stop. That struck harder than it should have. For days he had thought humans were dangerous because they ignored limits. But that was not the full truth. Humans were dangerous because they tested every limit, broke the useless ones, reinforced the necessary ones, and treated the difference as something discovered through impact. It was not chaos. Not entirely. It was judgment under pressure. Ugly, loud, reckless judgment. But judgment. Later, when the celebration softened and the crowd thinned, Thimblek stepped outside into the corridor. Through the wide observation glass, Station Gamma 7's star burned yellow and quiet. The human ship rested in its dock, ugly and practical and somehow comforting. Cassidy joined him. For once, she did not speak immediately. That silence felt deliberate. They leave at dawn, Thimblek said. Yeah. The station will return to normal. Cassidy looked back through the glass at the crowded grill, the laughing crew, the engineers still arguing over impossible diagrams. No, she said. It won't. Thimblek knew she was right. Normal was what the station had been before it learned better. Behind him, someone laughed. Somewhere below, a repaired power core hummed. Deep in the infrastructure, tardigrades slept like tiny patient legends. And for the first time in his career, Thimblek wondered how many rules existed only because nobody had smiled at them yet. At dawn, Thimblek stood alone in docking bay 12. The tenacious optimism detached with a soft metallic breath, carrying Cassidy, Dexter, Yuki, one illegal-looking souvenir, and a diplomatic report that no sane committee would believe. Cassidy waved from the viewport. Thimblek raised one hand. He did not smile. Not yet. The ship turned toward open space, then vanished into the star lanes, leaving Station Gamma 7 quieter than it had any right to be. Behind him, the repaired power core hummed through the floor. The commerce sector was already opening early. Vix had filed 6 reports and one proposal titled Experimental Efficiency through Controlled Human-Inspired Improvisation. Thimblek looked down at the Galactic Survival Manual on his data pad. Rule 3 still glared back. If a human smiles, run. He deleted the final word. Then he typed a correction. If a human smiles, decide whether to run with them. He submitted the edit. Somewhere in the station, a toaster achieved sentience and asked for coffee.